design element 3, which is connecting the lines or connecting the points. What we want to do is we want to connect each one of these points to their opposite. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. Let's begin by doing the horizontal and vertical line. So we're going to first start off with a y equals. And y equals, we see, gives us a horizontal line, but we want to limit that horizontal line. So to limit that, we want the x values to go as high as, well, actually, let's put these circles back in here so we can better see. We want the x value to go out to R3, but we want it to be negative. Let me get that right. So we want negative R sub 3. And we want that, we want to restrict the domain. So we want that to be less than or equal to x, less than or equal to positive R sub 3. So now we see that's limited. Let's go ahead now and put in the vertical line. So that's going to be x equals 0. We want to restrict the range or the y values. We want that to be as low, starting as low as negative R sub 3, less than or equal to the y values. Whoops. Less than or equal to y, less than or equal to positive R sub 3. So now we have that. Now let's work on the diagonal. Let's go ahead and start with, let's go ahead and start here with the pi over 8. What I want to realize is that we have a direct variation because we're going through the origin. So that's going to help us when we write the equation. So we want to write the equation for this point. Drawing a line from here to the opposite side, and I believe the opposite side is going to be this point. So to do that, we're going to type in y minus, well, we're on R sub 1. We want the cosine value, so that's going to be cosine, I'm sorry, we want the sine value, which is going to be sine of pi over 8. All right, equals, now because it's a direct variation, we can take the y value and divide it by the x value. So the y value is going to be the same, which is R sub 1 sine pi over 8. Let's use the parentheses, pi over 8. Because this here is going to give us our slope. So let's divide that by R sub 1. And we want cosine of pi over 8. So that's the slope. Then we want to place in, we want x minus cosine, I'm sorry, R sub 1 cosine of pi over 8. You know what, let's get rid of that. All right, so there we see that diagonal line. Again, we want to restrict it. So to restrict it, we want this to go, we want the x value to be the negative R sub 1 cosine pi over 8. And we want that to be less than or equal to, again, we're restricting the domain. So the x value of positive R sub 1 cosine pi over 8. And now we have that restricted. But what we can do is we can actually make this equation a little bit simpler. Here we have R sub 1 in the numerator and denominator. So those cancel. So I can remove that from the numerator and denominator. And then we see we have a sine and cosine of the same angle. Well, sine over cosine is tangent. So I can change this whole thing here to just tangent pi over 8. So let's change the sine here to a tan. And we still have the same thing. All right, and I want to duplicate this. So let's go to the gear and then duplicate, because now I want the negative value. So I'm going to place a negative here because I want the line to go in the opposite direction. And what I'm gonna have to do here is, because I'm going on the opposite direction, that means I need to change this here to a positive cosine, and my domain stays the same. Now let's go ahead and let's work on the pi over 4. So let's do y minus pi over 4 goes through the through the circle with the radius of r sub 2. And again, we're going to do sine, and this time we're doing pi over 4 equal to, we want the tangent again, and that's going to be pi over 4 for the same reason, because we have a direct variation. And we're going to say x minus r sub 2, and this here is going to be cosine of pi over 4. And again, we want to limit the domain here. So we want to go from we want the negative x value, which is going to be negative r sub 2 cosine pi over 4. Whoops, let's fix that. Cosine pi over 4. And we want that to be less than or equal to the x value, less than or equal to positive r sub 2. Again, it's going to be cosine of pi divided by 4. And then that gives us the other, well, that limits the line there. Now I want to duplicate this because I want to do the negative. So gear and then duplicate. All right, when I want the I want the slope of the line to be negative, and I'm coming from the other direction, so I need the cosine value to be positive. So now that's put in place. And now let's work on the 3 pi over 8. So let's come down here. And actually, you know what? Let's come here. Let's do a duplicate. So let's duplicate this one, and then let's pull it down. All right, so let's do done. We want 3 pi over 8. The tangent is going to be, or the slope there is going to be the 3 pi over 8. The other point is going to be 3 pi over 8. And let's see. That there, we don't want to, actually it's going to be r sub 1 because r sub 2 is too long. So we want r sub 1 and r sub 1. And they'll limit it to r sub 1, 3 pi over 8. Because we're limiting our domain, r sub 1, and again 3 pi over 8. Now we want the one with the negative slope, so we're going to duplicate. So gear, and then duplicate, and then done. So here, everything stays the same except for the slope. So we're going to make this here negative, and we need to make this here positive because we're coming from the opposite direction. All right, and then that there should be all of those pieces put into place. Let's go ahead and let's change these all to the same color for right now. So let's go ahead and change these here also to the purple color that we have. And let's change this up here as well. Whoops, purple. And this one here also to the purple. Actually, let's turn it on. And this one here as well also to the purple color. And then let's go ahead and turn these circles off. All right, so now we see we have the pulsating action. And in the last part, we're going to put the overall circular border around it, and then we're going to wrap up this tutorial.